हेलो एंड वेलकम टू हिस्टोरीफाई। आज का हमारा लेक्चरेट अकबर द ग्रेट के बारे में है और इस लेक्चर में हम फोकस करेंगे अकबर की राजपूत नीति, धार्मिक नीति और प्रशासनिक व्यवस्था के ऊपर। तो सबसे पहले बात करते हैं राजपूत नीति के बारे में। अकबर की जो राजपूत पॉलिसी थी वो बेसिकली कॉन्सेंट्रेटेड थी अराउंड द काइंड ऑफ एटीट्यूड ही अडॉप्टेड टुवर्ड्स द राजपूत्स। The Mughal policy towards the Rajputs adopted by Akbar contributed towards the expansion and consolidation of the Mughal Empire in India. Though it was largely designed to serve the political needs, but in certain cases, because of the matrimonial alliances involved, it also led to a kind of friendly relations between the Mughals and the Rajputs, with the exception of Maharana Pratap. ना पहले बात करते हैं हम मैट्रिमोनियल अलायंसेस की। मैट्रिमोनियल अलायंसेस का अर्थ है कि अकबर ने विवाह के संबंध राजपूत घराने में स्थापित करे, और श्रृंखला में सबसे पहला नाम आता है राजा भरमल, जो अंबर के शासक थे। उन्होंने अपनी पुत्री हरका बाई का विवाह अकबर के साथ कर दिया, और इसी तरह जैसलमेर, बीकानेर और मारवाड़ के राजपूत घरानों के साथ भी अकबर ने मैट्रिमोनियल अलायंसेस स्थापित करे थे। इसके अलावा अगर कोई शासक फ्रेंडली रिलेशंस नहीं एंटर करना चाहता था अकबर के साथ, तो देयर वाज ऑलवेज एन ऑप्शन ऑफ कॉन्क्वेस्ट्स एंड इन्वेजन। फॉर एग्जांपल, महाराणा प्रताप ने आजीवन अकबर की सोवरेनिटी को स्वीकार नहीं किया, और आगे चल के 1575 में हल्दी घाटी का युद्ध भी होता है, जो अकबर और महाराणा प्रताप के बीच लड़ा जाता है। बट प्राइमरीली अकबर फोकस्ड ऑन डेवलपिंग फ्रेंडली रिलेशंस विद द राजपूत्स, एंड ही गेव अ लॉट ऑफ इम्पोर्टेंस टू द पीपल based on their ability, and many of the Rajputs were appointed on high posts in the Mughal administration. अब हम आगे बात करते हैं अकबर के एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव अफेयर्स के बारे में, जो अकबर के काल में हुए काफ़ी अचीवमेंट्स हैं। सेंट्रल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन की अगर हम बात करते हैं तो क्योंकि अकबर का एम्पायर बहुत ही वास्ट था, ही ट्राई टू इंट्रोड्यूस अ सेंट्रलाइज्ड फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट. He tried to establish the authority of the king, and his decisions were final as far as all matters of military, political, administrative and judicial matters were concerned. Then in order to help him in the exercise of his functions, in order to help in a smooth functioning of administration, Akbar also had a team of ministers and officers. These ministers aided and advised the emperor in the exercise of his functions. However, he had authority and he was the final word as far as any decision was concerned. Now यहाँ पर ये mention करना ज़रूरी है that Abul Fazl introduced a new dimension to the Mughal theory of kingship. To him, the institution of kingship rather than the individual who held the office was endowed with far-e-izadi, जिसे divine effulgence कहा गया है. His Shahenshah, that is a king, was a unique personality and was the vice regent of God on earth. There is another important scholar on the subject, Sheikh Abdul Haq Dehelvi, who wrote the Nuriya-e-Sultaniya, a treatise covering all aspects of this subject during the Mughal Emperor Jahangir's reign. So we are talking here about centralized system of administration and the entire authority being in the hands of the emperor. Now, some of the important ministers who assisted the emperor were the wazir or the diwan, who was in charge of the revenue department, and then we have the Mir Bakshi, who was the head of the military department. He was also the paymaster general. Then there was the chief sadr or qazi, who basically dealt with cases of the judicial nature. Mir Sama was the supervisor of the royal household. He was responsible for the maintenance of the royal household. Then there was a Wakil or the prime minister, who exercised a lot of authority, and this was a post that was occupied by Bairam Khan once upon a time while he was the regent and the caretaker of the young emperor Akbar. Then in order to continue with a smooth functioning of administration, Akbar used to hold regular meetings, and these meetings were held in the Diwan-e-Khas. When we talk about provincial administration, now again for the smooth functioning of his empire, Akbar had divided his empire into a number of subas. Now, some of the historians have written that there were 12 subas, while the others mention that there were 15 provinces or subas, and these subas were governed by the subedars. Subedar meaning the governor who was kept in charge of the province. And later on, when we study about the later Mughal period, the position, or you can say the title Subedar, was used as Nawabs. So Nawabs were regarded as the deputies of the emperor, and this is a epithet that was used by the Subedars later on during the latter half of the Mughal rule. Then there was a Diwan who kept records of the land revenues, and both the Diwan and the Subedar were kind of a check on each other. They used to be responsible to each other. Then these provinces were further divided into districts or sarkars, and these sarkars were divided into smaller administrative units which were called parganas. And then we come down to the lowest level of administration, that was a village or the gram, and these villages were looked after by the village panchayats. रेवेन्यू सिस्टम की बात अगर हम करते हैं तो इट्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट ऑफ अकबर्स रेन. नाउ लैंड मेजरमेंट का जो सिस्टम है वो अकबर ने इंट्रोड्यूस किया था. ही वॉज इंस्पायर्ड इन दिस वर्क बाय हिज प्रेडिसेसर शेर शाह सूरी. तो बैम्बू जरीब एक मेजरमेंट का स्केल था विच वॉज यूज फॉर मेजरिंग ऑल द लैंड दैट फेल इन द royal arena. The land was first measured with the help of this bamboo jarib. Then the land was classified, or it was categorized according to the quality. There were lands referred to as good, middling and bad. That means good land which was very very fertile, middling which was not so fertile, and bad which was probably not fertile, या जिसे हम barren भी कह सकते हैं. It was infertile kind of land, or poor as far as its fertility was concerned. पोलच, परौती, छाछर और बंजर, इस तरीके का लैंड डिवीजन प्रोवाइड किया गया था. Now land revenue was calculated as an average production over the past 10 years, and accordingly it was fixed on the basis of these averages. Now the payment of taxes were done either in cash or in kind. Revenue officers were also instructed to be kind to the peasants while collecting the revenue. And if at all there was some kind of natural calamity like a drought or a flood, then the state government was kind and often remitted the collection of revenue. And here the bandobast of Todarmal, who was in charge of the revenue, who was the revenue minister of Akbar, is very very important as far as the land revenue reforms of Akbar are concerned. Now we go to the next very important aspect of Akbar's reign, that was his religious policy. Now we have often heard Akbar is referred to as Akbar the Great, and he is also called a national monarch, and a lot of credit goes to his religious policy for earning him the title of being a national monarch. Akbar realized that there is the need to unite the diverse races in his empire in order to establish a strong Mughal empire in the Indian subcontinent. So he followed a policy of religious tolerance and gained a lot of popularity amongst his subjects. First very important step that he took in this regard was the abolition of the jizya and the pilgrim tax. The pilgrim tax, that is the तीर्थ यात्रा कर जिसे कहते हैं. तीर्थ यात्रा पर जाने पर जितने भी तीर्थयात्री थे उन्हें टैक्स देना पड़ता था, जिसे पिलग्रिम टैक्स कहा गया. 1563 में अकबर ने इसे अबॉलिश कर दिया था. एंड देन जिजिया, जो टैक्स लगाया जाता था नॉन मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन ऑफ द एम्पायर पर, इसको भी अकबर ने समाप्त कर दिया था. दिस वॉज जिजिया वॉज प्राइमरीली द टैक्स विच वॉज इम्पोज ऑन द नॉन मुस्लिम सब्जेक्ट्स, एंड इट हैड स्टार्टेड ड्यूरिंग द सल्तनत पीरियड. और ये एक बहुत डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी टैक्स था, इसलिए अकबर ने इसे अबॉलिश कर दिया था. Then the policy of religious tolerance and religious freedom was practiced to a great extent under Akbar, and Emperor Akbar himself went ahead and participated in the various festivals that were celebrated by the population, whether they were festivals related to his religion, or whether they were festivals which were celebrated by people belonging to other religions. Then some of the very important offices in Akbar's reign and Akbar's court were occupied by Todarmal, Birbal, Raja Bhagwan Das, who were not Muslims. And then many grants were also granted by Akbar in matters of religion. And when we talk about Akbar's religious policy, we have to refer to the Ibadat Khana and the Deen-e-Ilahi that was introduced by Akbar. Now, Ibadat Khana was a place of religious discussions. Akbar had constructed this special place where every Thursday religious discussions were held amongst scholars. Initially, the doors of the Ibadat Khana were open only to Muslim scholars. However, Akbar wanted to understand the crux and the essence of other religions. So, the Ibadat Khana was now open to members of other faiths also. There were Christians and there were Jains and there were Hindus. Scholars who visited the Ibadat Khana and engaged in religious discussions and religious discourses. The Ibadat Khana was constructed in the year 1575. Now, Akbar had a lot of desire to learn about the various religions of the world, and it was because of this he had set up the Ibadat Khana. And inspired by these discussions, he realized that all the religions of the world preach almost the same thing. They talk about peace, they talk about tolerance, they talk about brotherhood. So based on this idea, Akbar believed in the principle of Sulh Kul or universal peace. He found elements of virtue and divine truth in every religion and went ahead to introduce a new religious order which is referred to as the Deen-e-Ilahi in the year 1582. Now, this was not a new religion that was introduced by Akbar. This has to be kept in mind. It was a religious order which was inspired by the religions of the world, and the Deen-e-Ilahi consisted of features which belong to Islam, which belong to Hinduism, which belong to Christianity, which belong to Jainism, which also belong to Zoroastrianism. So, he tried to establish a religious order which would bring about tolerance amongst his subjects and the people of his empire. However, unfortunately, the Deen-e-Ilahi did not gain a lot of popularity with the people. It was more like a code of conduct and somehow did not please the people at large. And very few of his courtiers also joined in this religion, and Birbal was the only Hindu courtier to accept the Deen-e-Ilahi of Akbar, and with Akbar's death the Deen-e-Ilahi also came to an end. Now, the lecture will not be complete till we refer and talk about the architectural and cultural achievements of Akbar. Akbar went ahead to build the beautiful city of Fatehpur Sikri, which is near Agra. In 1571, the choice of the site of Sikri reflected Akbar's gratitude to a Muslim saint at Sikri for the birth of his son. So we are talking about Sheikh Salim Chishti. There is a very famous story that Akbar had prayed for the birth of a son at the Dargah of Sheikh Salim Chishti in Fatehpur Sikri, and he was blessed with a boy child in the form of Salim, who later on grows to be Emperor Jahangir, and it was in his honor that he built a very beautiful dargah inside the Fatehpur Sikri. Then the Buland Darwaza that is there is also commemorative of Akbar's victories. It talks about Akbar's military achievements and architectural achievements of Akbar. Then when we talk about painters and other cultural achievements, Akbar did patronize a lot of artists, including the sculptors, architects, painters, musicians, singers and poets. Basavan, Lal and Dasman were some of the very famous painters of Akbar's reign, and the name of Tansen, who was a court singer, is known to all of us. So with this we come to the end of part 2 of the lecture related to Akbar the Great. Thank you so much.